lot to discuss with my guest, Democratic Senator Mark Warner, the Vice Chairman of the Intelligence Committee leading the Russia probe. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. So first, let's just start with this claim. President Trump says he never asked Comey to stop investigating Flynn. As you know better than I, Comey testified under oath before your committee in June that President Trump did ask him to drop the investigation. Whom do you believe?
I believe FBI Director Comey. I think he was very credible in his testimony and his private meetings with us. And it's not just Comey. You've had an attorney general who's had to recuse himself because of untold contacts with Russians. You had the President of the United States trying to intervene, as has been reported, with other national intelligence leaders who he appointed, saying, could you back off? We've had reports this week that he reached out to,
your colleague,
surprised by this, members of Congress saying, back off. This president has been obsessed with this investigation, always saying there's nothing there, but each week another shoe drops where we see more evidence of continuing outreach from Russians and some response from the Trump campaign and Trump individuals. In the case of Flynn, you have somebody who was his top security advisor, then his national security advisor, have a series of contacts with Russian officials beginning in early December with the president's son-in-law asking for back-channel connections to Russia, then efforts to try to intervene in American politics before they take over in terms of backing Russia off from a UN vote over Israel, then trying to get Russia to back off in terms of response to President Obama's sanctions. And now the president somehow saying he fired Flynn because he knew Flynn was lying to Pence. Well, if he knew that then, why didn't he act on it earlier? It raises a whole series of additional questions.
Well, let me ask you about that tweet. I quote, "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI. He has pled guilty to those lies. It's a shame because his actions during the transition were lawful. There was nothing to hide." That would seem to suggest that President Trump knew that Michael Flynn had lied to the FBI, which is, of course, a crime, when he fired Flynn and also when he, according to Comey, asked Comey to back off. That seems to be in the territory of obstruction of justice.
And again, that's why I think you're going to see much more coming from the special prosecutor. Clearly, General Flynn and his son was in a great deal of legal jeopardy. The fact that General Flynn was only charged with one account, a major account, lying to the FBI, I believe means that there's many more stories that General Flynn will have to tell about his time during the campaign and during the transition. So I think there's more to come. And what we see here is this president, whenever any of his close associates falls into problems, he tries to disassociate. So the other individual, Mr. Papadopoulos, he tries to dismiss, again, somebody who's already pled guilty. His campaign manager, his deputy campaign manager, Mr. Manafort and Mr. Gates, who've been indicted, he tries to back them off. Now they're even trying to call General Flynn. I hear the White House has said this former Obama appointee. Remember, General Flynn was someone who led the Republican convention in a very inappropriate, lock her up kind of chant. This guy, Flynn, was completely tied in to the Trump operation throughout the campaign and then was national security advisor. How many people can this president continue to dismiss, particularly as the circle gets closer and closer, even to family members?
President Trump did say this on Saturday when asked about the Trump, when asked about the Flynn plea deal. Take a listen.
What has been shown is no collusion. No collusion. There's been absolutely no collusion.
Is there any evidence of collusion? Is there any evidence of the Trump campaign and the Russians having some sort of agreement on how Russia can help the Trump team during the campaign?
Let's again just go through the facts. We've had an FBI director who's been fired because of the president's intervention. We had the Attorney General had to recuse himself because of his many contacts with Russians he didn't reveal. We've had a series of these other individuals indicted or pleading guilty already. We also have mounting evidence almost every week of additional contacts between the Russian government or Russian officials and officials connected to the Trump campaign under the guise of trying to improve relations. But as we look back at that meeting in June that included Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort, where there were constant overtures from Russians to say, hey, we've got dirt on Hillary Clinton. We want to share that with the Trump campaign. Now, we've got more dots to connect. We've got to finish our investigation.
So it's still circumstantial, no actual concrete proof yet.
I'm going to reserve my final judgment until we have all these individuals in to see us. But there has never been in modern American history a political campaign that had this much outreach to a foreign government and a foreign adversary in this case throughout the campaign and throughout the transition.
I want to get to taxes in a second, but I do want to ask you about this detail from a New York Times story in which Flynn's deputy, K.T. McFarland, who was on the Trump transition team, wrote in an email, quote, if there is a tit-for-tat escalation with Russia, Trump will have difficulty improving relations with Russia, which has just thrown USA election to him. Now, the Trump team is saying, she's just saying that's how Democrats are going to describe it. She's not declaring it as a fact.
And again, another reason why Ms. McFarland needs to come in and not just testify in front of Mueller, but testify in front of the congressional committees. We have a responsibility, and we've been trying to run this down the middle, Chairman Burr and I, and to get all the facts out to the American public so that not only can we figure out if there was collusion, but the fact is Russia and other foreign adversaries are continuing to use misinformation, disinformation, and these type of overtures. How do we prevent this from happening again?
Let's talk about taxes. The Senate passed the bill late Friday night, and the
early
House,
Saturday morning.
Saturday morning, and the House and Senate are now going to go to a conference committee to reconcile the differences in the tax bills. Is there any chance that this bill will not become law?
I think there still remains some chance. And I was saying Friday was my single worst day as a U.S. Senator. Because as somebody who wanted to be part of tax reform, who realizes we need to have a more competitive corporate rate, that realizes we need to bring back some of those American profits. But three things about this whole process that just plain stunk. One was, this was Swamp 101, the process on Friday night where the bill was being hand-drafted. Lots of provisions were being included for special interest. One got exposed already, exempting a particular religious college in Michigan, backed by the DeVos family, for special tax breaks. That got exposed at least, but I will bet you we will see literally dozens more of these special provisions put in to help special interest. Secondly, as somebody who's been passionate about not adding to our already $20 trillion in debt, this bill, I believe, will add over $2 trillion to the debt, even with whatever growth comes from these tax cuts. That's not only because of the $1.5 trillion that's already been acknowledged, but this tax bill is set up so that all of the goodies, the things that are actually somewhat helpful to individuals, are all set to expire within 5 years, creating what's called more fiscal cliffs, and chances are those provisions will be extended, driving up more debt. And third, on just plain substance. For example, I think they got some of the international provisions wrong, so that unfortunately this bill may actually incent more companies to move businesses abroad, where they will build a factory, say, in Germany, and then put their intellectual property in some tax haven, and because you can average your taxes, have corporations still paying virtually no American tax. And then if we were going to bring back this money at such cheap rates, why not put a requirement in that these companies would actually invest some of that money in training their workforce, giving them the skills they need to compete, as opposed to what I'm afraid is that we will see the vast majority of these funds come back and be used for share buyback and dividends rather than things like investing in human capital or investing in much needed infrastructure.
All right, Senator Mark Warner, Democrat of the Commonwealth of Virginia.